What I want to talk about this morning is this concept about the will of God, right? So raise your hand if you've ever wondered what the will of God is. Yeah, okay, all right. Okay. Yeah, fantastic, right? It's a universal question. In my experience, and LA is one of the least church cities in the world. Even atheists and agnostics wonder, is there a point? What's the will of God? And if you've been raised in religious communities, searching for the will of God can be a little complicated sometimes, can it? Like if you're wondering, like, who should I marry, or what career should I take, or where should I move, or you know, decaf or caffeinated, like these really important questions. You know, we search and we answer these, and sometimes the way that, you ever found like people have really silly ways of trying to figure out what the will of God is? Have you ever know people who do like the Russian roulette with the Bible? You know, time like where you open up a Bible to a random page, you close your eyes, you point to a verse, and whatever it says is like, that's the will of God. Have you heard that before? It's stupid. But yeah. And there's the old story where like the guy opens up the book and he points his finger to a verse and it says, Judas went out and hung himself. All right? And he was like, oh, you know, so he's like, best 2 out of 3. So he opens up the Bible and he does it again and it says, go now and do likewise. You know? And it's like, okay, so maybe that's not the best approach to that kind of thing. And I don't know if you've ever noticed this, and I want to be respectful with the scriptures, but I also want to honor my experience with the scriptures, because I generally don't like it when people call the scriptures like an answer book. You ever notice that before? Like people just go to the scriptures, it has all the answers. And that has not been my experience. Have you ever had a question about life that the scriptures didn't answer? I've had lots of them. Right? And what's interesting about that for me is that the scriptures aren't an answer book, they're a question book. The scriptures don't always give me all the answers, but they inform my questions. Right? And in fact, the scriptures aren't like a pill to swallow to make you right. They're like a bench press to make you strong. Right? And so what I want to do this morning is I want to bench press a few texts with you, but as we're talking about this idea of the will of God, it's interesting because sometimes the scriptures are really helpful. And if you're new here this morning and maybe you've like picked up that old book, maybe you've been in a hotel and like the Gideon stamped it and it's there and you're trying to figure out, like sometimes the scriptures are super, super helpful. So for example, I remember being a kid wondering what the will of God is, and all of us raise our hands. We've all wondered, what's the will of God for our lives? And I remember getting to 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, this is the will of God. And I was like, yes! This is amazing, right? So should I date Lauren or Susan, right? And so after the colon, it's going to say Lauren or Susan, or like, should I move here or should I move there? It's going to say Perth, right? Or Johannesburg or whatever, right? It's like, this is amazing. Right? So I was super excited. So I was like, oh my goodness, what's it going to say? This is fantastic. This is amazing. I got all big. And then I looked at it and I said, this is the will of God. And it said these 2 words, your holiness. Everyone say your holiness. And he's not talking about the Pope. You know, he's talking like for you to become holy. And I want to encapsulate what my emotions were when I read that for the first time. I was a young person trying to figure faith out. And it was like this. So I was raised in the 80s and 90s. I was raised in the golden era of Disney animation. Any Disney fans in the house? Yeah. So the golden era really, we're kind of in the midst of a renaissance with them, for reasons we'll talk about later. But in the 90s, it was this beautiful, amazing thing. And they had just come out of a really dark season. In fact, this is more of an aside. You get the asides. There's a documentary called Waking Sleeping Beauty. Has anyone ever seen it? Oh, it's amazing. I highly recommend it. And they talk about how in the 1980s, Disney was on the verge of bankruptcy, Disney Animation. They were going to sell it for scraps. They had made a movie called The Black Cauldron, which was horrible. And it got beat out in the box office by the Care Bear movie. Right? That's embarrassing. Right? That's really, really bad. And then all of a sudden, through the documentary talks about this, but all of a sudden through this serendipitous events, like the right stars aligned, and all of a sudden you've got all these amazing animated features coming out of Disney in the late 80s, early 90s, and it's really, really cool. What were you remember some of the movies that came out in the late 80s, early 90s that were Disney cartoons? Yeah, give me some of them. Did you say Little Mermaid? Yeah. Any Little Mermaid fans? Yeah, okay, right. What are some other ones? Lion King, right? Fantastic. Love the with James Earl Jones as Mufasa. Are you kidding me? That's fantastic. There's 2 more. There's Beauty and the Beast. Oh, yeah. There's Aladdin, right? With Robin Williams as a genie. You kidding me, right? I can't believe it. I'm losing to a rug, right? That kind of thing. It was amazing. I loved it. And then, of course, Beauty and the Beast, which was the first animated feature ever to be nominated for an Academy Award for Best Picture. Not like a cartoon, like Best Picture, right? This is the golden era of Disney animation. This is my childhood. And I remember very clearly being infinitely marked by watching these films and thinking, wow, like this is quality storytelling. So then fast forward, I was raised in Kansas, which is in the middle of the States. I moved to Los Angeles for work, right? And it's exciting. It's like, hooray for Hollywood. Like things are good, right? And I'm driving down Sunset Boulevard and I see this gigantic billboard for a new Disney animated feature. And like the 10-year-old inside of me got excited. You know what I'm talking about? Like the little, like, your inner child, like your little 10-year-old's running around inside of you that gets angry at nothing for no reason. That guy, yeah, he got excited, right? He was stoked. I was like, what new story? What's comedic sidekick? What amazing soundtrack? What Grammy Award-winning whatever? Like, this is gonna be epic. This is gonna be huge. This is gonna change everything. Like, they're back. It's amazing. And I got closer, and I got closer, and then in big letters, in a big billboard, it said, Bambi 2. And that little 10-year-old inside of me died that day. I was massively disappointed. And I don't, not to be disrespectful, but that's exactly how I felt when I read, and this is the will of God for your life, your holiness. And it was kind of like, really? It's like Christmas morning when your parents didn't save up. Really? Really, this is what we're doing? Or like ladies, when the guy gets on the knee and opens the ring and you're like, really? This is what we're doing? This is the thing? This is the best you could, like, this is it? Right? Because if you're like me, is that a little too close to home for some of you? Like, all the guys are like, I saved up, shut up, kind of thing. We've been fighting about it for 20 years. So for me, because words matter. And I was raised in a religious environment as a kid, actually a fairly decent one. It was actually a great experience for me. But even then, even being raised in a fantastic spiritual community, the word holy doesn't exactly get my buzz going. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like, yes, like, what'd you do this weekend? Oh, I was so holy. I was like crushing the holiness, right? It was like Red Bull, holy, kind of thing. It was amazing. Oh, what are you doing later today? I'm gonna totally get my holy on. I'm gonna get holy, it's gonna be fantastic. You should come. It's like, no, I'm good. That kind of thing, right? Because holiness has kind of this, if you're like anything like me, and honestly, if you're like a lot of people who've never gone to church before, holiness kind of has a bad taste in their mouths. You know what I'm talking about? It's because it's kind of like holier than thou. Right? Like self-righteous, like better than kind of a thing, like you think you're better than, or worse, it's like you never do anything fun. You know what I'm talking about? Right? Because words matter, they shape our lives, and this is especially true in church world. So like there's a word we use in church a lot, it's the word good. Everybody say good. Good, right? And we say God is good, and all the time, yeah. And if you're new, you're like, what is happening? I didn't sign up for, what is this? Kind of thing. But what's interesting about the word good is, remember when you were a kid and your mom told you to be good? Remember that? Was she telling you to do something or not do something? Not do something, right? Jason, don't hit the hamster. Jason, don't punch your sister. I was violent. Jason, be good. Or never in the history of the world has a kid gone up to a mom and said, Mom, I'm bored. And mom goes, well, be good. No, that doesn't work. I was being good. That's why I'm bored, right? And somehow the idea of good has become the absence of evil rather than the opposite of evil, right? And here's the thing. It's entirely possible for you to, let's pretend it was entirely possible to rid yourself of all your evil things. It wouldn't make you good. It would make you boring. And holiness is the exact same way. Holiness is the exact same way. It's like just getting rid of all the junk in your life. That doesn't make you holy. It makes you boring. In fact, if that was the case, if the case was in order to be holy or good, you have to get rid of things. The most holy people, you know where they are? In the cemetery. Because they never do anything wrong. They are crushing the holy thing. They're dead, right? And that's no wonder that's why people are allergic to coming to church. It's like, great, that's the place I go to be told to stop. That's the place I go where I'm told that I'm wrong, bad, broken, ashamed, blah, 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 blah. That's where I get, thank you, but no thank you. And is it possible that God has, in fact, is it possible that God has a different message for us? That Jesus died to make us boring. I thought he died so that we could live, not the other way around. But so have you ever seen the movie, The Princess Bride? Come on, right? It's great. Rob Reiner, it's a fantastic movie. It's a hokey musical score, but they killed that movie. And in the movie, you have the great Fassini, the short little bald guy, right? And what's the word that he always says? Inconceivable, right? He didn't fall, inconceivable, right? That kind of thing. And after a while, Inigo Montoya, the Spaniard, looks at him and goes, you keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means. And I think that's what God says to us a lot. He's like, listen, you keep using the word good. I don't think it means what you think it means. And you keep using the word holy, and I don't think it means what you think it means. Is it possible that the word holy means something different, that it's actually better, that it's actually beautiful, that it's actually intoxicating, right? And so here's what I want to suggest to you this morning. If this is the only thing you take away from the talk this morning, I'll consider coming here a great success. Is it possible that when we look at the word holy, we're going to put it on the screen here, we look at the word holy, that when we're talking about isn't the absence of evil, it's the opposite of evil, which really means the word holy is this: extraordinary. That to be holy is to live an extraordinary life. When it's in the scriptures say, this is the will of God for your life, for you to become extraordinary, right? That is worth suffering for. That is worth dying for. That when Jesus died on the cross, he wasn't thinking about the things you weren't gonna do because you knew him. He was thinking about the things you get to do because you know him. And we know this is true because the extraordinary life is difficult. The extraordinary life is meaningful. The extraordinary life is rare. Like when you see a married couple who've been married for 50 years holding their little hands and walking down the beach, you think, that's extraordinary. That's holy. That quickens. Like, it doesn't matter what you believe. Like atheists, agnostics, Buddhists, Baptists, doesn't matter who you are. When you see that, you're like, yes, I'll take 2, please. Right? And so as we're searching for this, so what I want to do, I want to walk through a couple of ideas around this. What are the habits that unleash it? And here's the ramp up to it. So quick show of hands. There's usually 2 different types of people in the world. There are people, first group, raise your hand if you like to run. You like to run. Yeah, there's a few of you. Nobody likes you. No, I'm kidding, because you came with a friend, good for you. All right, so somebody likes you. All right, good. So quick show of hands. How many of you do not like to run? Yeah, it's like, you can hear it. It's like whoosh. It's great, like it blows my hair back. It's fantastic, that's great. Yeah, and here's, my dad taught me a lot of things when I was a kid. One of the things he taught me is you never see a happy runner. Now here's the thing. Now, for those of you who raise your hands to running, like, I know happy people who run, right? Endorphins and whatever, blah, 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 kind of a thing. I know happy people who run, good for you, right? But you never see a happy runner, right? Think about it. You're driving to church on Sunday mornings and you see somebody running down the road. They don't look happy. They look like they're doing complex math problems in their head, right? So, or you watch the Olympics, the Summer Olympics, the real Olympics. You watch the Summer Olympics, right? And someone runs 1,000-meter whatever, and as they cross the finish line, they break the tape, unless they're Bolt, and they're like, unless they're that guy. Everybody else, when they cross the finish line, do they look happy? No, it looks like someone ripped off one of their toenails, right? And they're like, ah! And honestly, when I watch, I don't know whether to clap or call an ambulance, right? It's very confusing. So I hate running, but years ago, I was reading a magazine and I saw on the cover, the article said, the perfect body. So I thought it was about me. And why is that funny? Right, so I turned it, actually it wasn't about me, it's about a guy named Dean Karnazes. Dean Karnazes is an ultra marathon runner. An ultra marathon is anything over 100 kilometers, right? So bear with me just for a second. This guy, he ran 50 marathons in 50 consecutive days in all 50 American states. And when he was done, he ran home from New York to San Francisco. So this guy's like a living, breathing Forrest Gump, right? He likes running, kind of thing, right? Okay. One time he did a Badlands marathon in 40 to 50 degrees Celsius heat, right, through Death Valley. It was so hot he had to run on the dotted line of the road. Otherwise, his shoes would start to melt. There was a car driving next to him that would roll down the window to give him bread for sustenance, and when they rolled down the window, the bread would start to toast. It was so hot. The first time he did it, he got like 20, 30 kilometers in, and he collapsed from heat exhaustion, nausea. The second year, he came in first place, and the 4th year, he came in first place. My favorite story about Dean is he did 120 miles, so like 200-kilometer relay race? A 200-kilometer relay race against 8 other teams of 12 people by himself, okay? And he actually beat one of the teams. Now, can you imagine being the team that lost, right? Hey, Bill, hey, Gary, hey, Tim, hey, Sally, hey, Julie, who beat us? That guy over there, right? And Dean's like, hey, I like running, kind of thing. So here's the thing. I hate running, but I will remember as clear as it was yesterday reading that story for the first time, and no kidding, I started looking around for the nearest pair of running shoes. You know what I'm talking about? When someone does something extraordinary, when someone pushes the human limit, it creates this gravitational pull around them, doesn't it? And it makes them attractive, it makes them compelling, and it makes them, where even if you have no business running, you start looking around for the nearest pair of running shoes. And it's my conviction that Jesus is like the Dean Karnazes of life, that he lived a certain way that created this gravitational pull around him, that he made choices that were so noble, that were so compassionate, that were so extraordinary, that it created this gravitational pull where literally time bent in half to where now we designate time by his life. And what does it look like to connect to a person like that? And what does it look like for him to unleash that same thing in us? So what I want to do is I want to unlock 5 things that can begin to excavate the potential that God has put in your life. Are you ready? Raise your hand real quick if you've heard of the phrase spiritual disciplines. Yeah, right? And just real quick, throw out, what are a few spiritual disciplines? Prayer. Say it again. Worship. Yeah, what else? Fasting. Yeah, like fasting. Like Foster's. Australian for, we don't drink that here. That's good. Yeah, good. So somebody else. Say it again. Let's hear meditation. Yeah, nice. Okay, cool. Yeah, right. Good. Somebody else. Say it again. What did you say? Yes, you got like scripture, you got prayer, you got fasting, right? You got like church attendance, worship, tithing, Yeah, tithing, right? You got like all those kinds of fun things, right? And here's what's interesting. You know what word, when I used to do more work with churches, you know what word almost never shows up? I want to put it on the board here. Risk. Everyone say risk. This word almost never shows up on a list of spiritual disciplines, right? Where Richard Foster wrote his seminal work, The Celebration of Discipline. This word ain't in it. And here's what's fascinating about this is St. Augustine said risk is the chief of all virtues because it's through risk that all virtue flows. Dean Karnazes said it this way: somewhere on the lines we have confused comfort with happiness. And is it possible that in our pursuit of happiness we've forgotten that in order to be happy you have to be uncomfortable? And that Jesus doesn't invite us into a comfortable life. He invites us into a meaningful one. He doesn't say, hey, I'm gonna take care of everything. He's gonna say, I'm gonna make you the kind of person who can move through anything. It's a different conversation. I gotta be honest with you. One of the greatest challenges of spiritual leaders in creating a spiritual community is this drift towards comfort. The longer you know Jesus, this is interesting, the longer you're a part of the establishment, the less risk you can tolerate. And so, but here's what's fun, is what Jesus wants to poke at that. He wants to disrupt that he died to disrupt this metaphor of like, hey, Jesus came to make it all better. He didn't. He came to make you strong. And part of the challenge of spiritual leadership is reminding us together as a community that the point of life isn't to be comfortable. The point of life is to be courageous and to move into things that are worth being courageous about. So here's how this works. So I used to be a professor at a university in the States called Pepperdine University in Malibu, California. And so it's actually kind of a fun story. When they hired me, so I was doing some consulting with them, and then I was like, hey, I'd like to teach there. So I was like, who's the person who decides that? And someone gave me an email. And so I emailed them every day for 3 months. And I said, hey, can I teach you? 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 It was awesome. And this is gonna sound maybe a little arrogant, but I was like, hey, I love Pepperdine. I love college students. I was a college pastor at this church in Los Angeles called Mosaic at the time. I love what you're doing here. I promise you, if you hire me, if you take a swing on me, if you take a chance on me, you will never regret it. So after 3 months, I got an email back. I'll never forget. It was like, ping, email back, and they're saying, yeah, fine, you're hired. It was like that. It was great. And they said, I said, well, what do you want me to teach? And they said, just do whatever you want. This is a top 50 school. And I was like, awesome. So I got to create my own class. It was called Power in the Human Spirit. And the assignments weren't like books to read. They were risks to take. And so every class period, they would go away and they would have a risk to take for the next week. It was awesome. We had so much fun. They were so scared. It was the best. It was the best. It was amazing. And one of the students in the class was named Lauren. Lauren was this quiet, she's a quiet girl, but she was a leader. And her risk was to go to her coach at Pepperdine University and tell him that her dream was to be an Olympic trainer someday. That was her little risk, right? And here's the thing. For some of you might be thinking, that's not that big of a deal. Not that big of a deal. But here, two things about that. One is you're right. Two is, I don't know if you've ever noticed this before, but like coaches aren't necessarily like the cuddliest people in the world. Have you noticed that before? It's not like, oh, my heart is broken. Who am I going to go to? My coach? No, that's not how that works, right? Also, telling your coach at a university that you want to be an Olympic trainer someday is kind of like saying I want to be more successful than you someday. So good luck with that. So she went in and she was like nervous, right? When she goes in, she sits down and she's kind of, you ever been in a meeting like where you want to say something but you're stalling, right? So she's like, hey, how's your marriage? You know, that kind of thing. Just like biding time. And finally the coach is like, what do you want? What do you want from me? I'm a busy man. Spit it out. And so she said it like a confession, right? Like she was saying something wrong. She was like, I want to be an Olympic trainer someday. And it's like a little bubble, like a little dream bubble. You ever had that? You ever seen that before? Right? It's like Glenda the Good Witch, you know, kind of thing, a little dream bubble. And because the coach is kind and gentle and sensitive and emotionally intelligent, he said, well, that's impossible. And her little dream bubble was like, and Glenda was like, and then he made it worse. He was like, Lauren, I mean, it's impossible. Like, in order to do that, you'd have to go to Colorado Springs. That's where the Olympic headquarters is for training. He's like, it's super competitive. It's in often ways harder than being an athlete, right? It's super competitive. You'd have to know somebody that had to pull strings for you. It's just, I don't necessarily see it happening for you. And as this conversation is going, her head just sinks. And it's like with every new sentence he says, like a brick on her back, and she's just sinking. And before the first tear started to fall, she heard the strangest noise. She heard the phone pick up, and she heard him dial a number, and then she heard him say, hey, Karen, how's it going? Yeah, good. Hey, how's Colorado? Okay, fantastic. Yeah, hey, I've got a girl here. You still doing the Olympic training program? Is that still your thing? Perfect. I've got interns? Excellent. Hands Lauren the phone, and 3 months later, she did an internship in Colorado Springs, and now she's on her way to becoming an Olympic trainer. So here's the thing. Yeah, it's cool, right? It's really cool. So here's the thing. What things could be happening in your life if you just took a little bit more risk? Not a lot, just a little. What things could be happening in your marriage? What things could be happening in your family? What things could be happening with your career? What things could be happening in your recreation, your finances, your hobbies, your spirituality? What things could be happening here at Riverview if you just took a little bit more risk? Not a lot. And what God wants to say to us is, hey, look, you do not get to experience the fullness that I have for you unless you learn to make risk, not just a moment of life, but a lifestyle. Because here's the deal. When you open the pages of the scriptures, no matter what page you turn to and do this, you're gonna meet someone whose life was defined by risk. If you're new to our show, if you're new to like Christian spirituality and trying to figure things out, I wanna let you know you're in for a treat. There are people in the scriptures whose lives are inspiring, broken, dysfunctional, and beautiful. It's incredible. If you think about Abraham goes from Haran to Canaan. God says, hey, I want to go to a land I'm going to show you later. You're going to be a blessing to all nations. He's like, okay, cool. He goes, right? You think about Esther, a beauty queen who stands up to King Xerxes, right? You think about David when he's a kid. He stands up to Goliath. Later, he stands up to Saul, and then he leads a whole nation. You think about Paul, used to be Saul, becomes Paul, and then he stands up to the Roman Empire, and they create this movement that is such a threat to the Roman state that they persecute them because there's so much beauty happening there outside of the government. Like, these are beautiful, courageous people. And it's almost like God is saying, you don't get to have the life that I want unless you're ready to expand your life with risk. And I want to ask you, what is at any given moment, this is usually true. Usually when I give this talk, there's like a little risk in your mind that you're thinking about that you've been putting off. Right? Almost always, whenever I'm having this conversation with people, there's a risk you've been wanting to take, there's a risk you've been meaning to take, and you've been putting it off. And what God is whispering to you is, it's time to take it off the shelf. Come on, let's go. Let's get busy living or get busy dying, or let's do both and have it all at the same time, right? So that's the first word. Everyone say risk? Risk. Okay, fantastic. So the second word, let's put it on the screen here. Second word, everyone say it with me. Generosity. Because here's the thing. How many of you know people who are risk takers, and we have a word for them? They're called idiots. Right? Raise your hand if you know someone who's a risk taker and they're dumb. They're not, right? No hands are going up because are you sitting next to them? Is that the thing? Is that the right? Oh, that's awesome. I see a little shoulder rubbing. That's fantastic. Yeah, because all risks are not created equal, right? Some risks are dumb. Other risks are beautiful. And here's the thing about this. This is the way that I understand this idea of generosity. So in America, we have this holiday. I don't know if you have it here. It's called Christmas. Do you guys have that? Because if you don't, you should really try it. it is fantastic. Like we took this really beautiful sacred tradition from 2,000 years ago and commercialized it. It's like, it's the best. We like had Jesus, we gave him like a fat suit, wrapped him in red. It's a ball. Have you heard of this? You should try this. It's amazing. So at Christmas time, when my sister and I were growing up, I don't know, there's some kids in the room. I don't know if you realize this, but when you're a little kid, Christmas is awesome, isn't it? You remember being a little kid? You remember being like 6 years old? Christmas was the best when you were 6 years old. It was amazing. It was wondrous. It was magical. You got everything that you wanted on your list. It was the best. And as a parent, it's great because you could kids are satisfied with so little, right? So like a 2-year-old kid, you go to Target, get them like a 99-cent ball, you wrap it in paper. You don't even have to wrap it really, right? And they come out and you're like, here you go. And they're like, a ball. And it's like, yes. And as parents, you're like, I am mighty. Right, kind of thing. I have won. I am the best parent in the universe. And the kid is like, I agree. Right? They can't even talk it. And they're like, right, kind of thing. And here's the thing, the funny thing, as you get older, what happens to joy on Christmas? Yeah, it's like the American economy after our last election. It's just very sobering. It's very, very terrifying, right? It's this kind of thing. As you get older, the joy starts to go down a little bit. And here's the thing, my sister and I, we're about 2.5 years apart. She's older and wiser and better looking. And we were both of us were kind of in tandem, right? We're just kind of like, elementary school was awesome, then junior high, not so great, and then high school, not so great, and then uni, it was like, this is really not great. And then by you get out of college and it's just like, why are people even trying again anymore? It's like, okay, it's Christmas, whatever. When are we doing this? Let's just get it over with kind of a thing. And then the funniest thing happened as our joy filters is going in the toilet. My sister, fast forward a couple years, one Christmas, all of a sudden her joy, mine's like tanking, and her joy just like spikes. And I'm annoyed by that. And I'm like, what's the deal? We used to be in cahoots. What's the deal? And so I started doing like a compare contrast kind of thing. So I started looking at the things that she had that I didn't. And I was like, well, she's married. That can't be it. I was like, what else could it be? And here's the thing, they've been married for a while and their body parts work, so what had happened? Yeah, some of you are like, their body parts work. What does that mean? Ask your parents. So yeah, they had kids, right? They had kids. And that's when I learned the dirty little secret of Christmas, is that when you're a kid, you think that you're having the most fun in the room. You do. You're like, yes, this is about me. And you're having a ball. But what you don't know, because they gave you a ball, what you don't know, there are people in the room much older than you, way old, and they are having more fun than you. You know what I'm talking about? Parents, you don't tell people about it. You certainly don't tell your kids. You don't want them to know. Even though you were like fighting with your spouse the night before about the My Little Pony or Barbie or whatever, and you're building the thing, you're like swearing at each other, and you got bandages on your fingers for whatever. That's what I've heard. Is that not true? Yeah, it is true, isn't it? All right, yeah. So it doesn't mean, even though that's happening, the next morning, you are having 10 times more fun than your kids are. And even though they're gonna get bored with the ball 30 seconds later, you're glowing for weeks. Because the scriptures put it this way, it's way more fun to give than it is to receive. And there's something sacred, there's something holy of living a generous life, that God has actually called us into a life that is generous, to take risks that are generous. In fact, the word generous has the same root word as generative or generous. Like it means that we can create something. It means that it doesn't take energy, it actually gives you energy. And I remember working with, there was a friend of mine years ago. Her name is Jennifer, and what she did for a living is she helps, I was like, what do you do for a living one time? She goes, well, I help millionaires become billionaires. I was like, oh. She's like, what do you do? I was like, I do that. That's what I do, kind of a thing. I lie to make friends. And we became friends, and we started doing some coaching together. And then I remember a little while later, she called me, she texted me up, she's like, hey. I was like, what? She goes, I have great news. I said, what? She goes, I quit my job. I was like, why is that great? And then because what happened is she discovered the joy of generosity. And she quit her job. This was interesting. She's very creative. She quit her job and she's partnering with the former CFO of Apple to create a hedge fund of like several $1 billion to serve the world's poorest 1 billion people. And she's like, Jason, I still work with millionaires and billionaires, but now I work with millionaires and billionaires to help them become philanthropists. And she's like, I'm having so much fun. And the crazy thing is, I remember whenever we talk on the phone, it's not like how are you doing? It's where are you doing, right? Because like we're always like crisscrossing in the air, and we're like, hey, Jennifer, how's it going? What city are you? What country are you? What hemisphere are you in? That kind of thing. And she goes, Jason, I'm having so much fun, and I'm listening to her travel schedule. I'm thinking, Jennifer, how do you have time to do this? And she goes, oh, Jason, you don't understand. Doing this doesn't cost me energy. Doing this gives me energy. And God wants to invite you into a future that doesn't cost energy, but creates energy. And it comes through taking risks of generosity. So what was the first word? Risk. Second word, generosity. Okay, the third word, slap it up on the screen. Say it with me. Community. So whenever you take risks to generosity, the strangest thing starts to happen. Whenever you take risks to generosity, you start creating community. Have you noticed that before? In fact, that's the way that the first century church started. The origins of the first century church. I mean, a person coming back from the dead, that helps, right? But the first century church started by a group of people taking beautiful risks together to make the world a better place. That's how it started, and that's why it caught on. Everyone was super excited about it. But I don't know about you, but I've found in my life oftentimes that creating community can be hard. Have you ever noticed that before? Creating community can be really hard sometimes, and sometimes I feel like I get in my own way. So like years ago, when we were kids, we would have we were a nuclear family, like a Norman Rockwell painting, except nobody got along. And we would, it was my parents, mom and dad, and then my sister and I, she's older, I'm younger, and we would sit at dinner, having dinner, and we would play the colossal game of like parents ask you questions you don't want to answer and then get frustrated with you. You know what I'm talking about? Right, since the beginning of time, parents, because they're geniuses, have been asking two questions. The first is, how was your day? Right? Because you put so much work into it. How is your, like mom and dad are like, over here, like, what question can we ask them that's really going to open them up like a flower? What question can we ask them that's really going to help them like want to participate and be a part of the family? Ooh, I know. How was your day? Is that good? Yeah, okay. So then you go out, okay, break. And we come over here and we're like, hey, you're eating dinner. And it's like, hey, how was your day? And then what do kids say? Fine. And then mom and dad are like, okay. So that didn't work. And then they come into the household again and they're like, okay, what could we ask them? Well, what did they do today? Well, they were at school. Okay, great. So let's ask them about school. Okay. Break. And they come back. And they're like, what'd you learn at school today? And since the beginning of time, for the beginning of time, parents have been asking this question, right? And since the beginning of time, students have been saying, nothing. And the parents are like, you win this round, but we'll be back with the same two questions tomorrow night, hoping for a different answer, which is also the definition of insanity, right? So we're doing this thing. And because it's the 80s, we're watching Pat Sajak and Vanna White on TV with Wheel of Fortune. And they're asking the questions, what'd you learn at school today? Nothing. What'd you do today? Nothing. Fine. How are you? Blah, blah, blah. And my sister suddenly pipes up. She goes, I learned something at school today. And I just from the way that she said it, made me know that I was in trouble somehow. Okay, and my parents were like, well, they're like, my parents were stoked. They're like, what? She wants to speak to us. This is amazing. How can we connect? And so my sister goes, well, they say, like, what'd you learn? And my sister goes, Jason has a crush on a girl. And my parents go, ooh. And everyone, all eyes are on me. It's like a spotlight now, and it's like an interrogation. It's like I'm in like a 30s noir, like, where were you on the night of the 35th? And the 35th is not a real day. And and I wish that I could say, I wish I could have been confident, right? I wish I could go back and be like, that's right, her name's Susan, and she's a babe, and I will wed her, kind of a thing. And Amanda, how many dates have you been on? 0. That's what I thought, that kind of thing. She was always dating somebody. But I wish I could be like that, but I wasn't. What happened was I freaked out. I was so embarrassed. I was so ashamed. And you ever, those like Wile E. Coyote, when he leaves really fast, it's like, pew! And there's like a silhouette, and like the silverware is still floating in midair. Like, that's what I did, right? There was like a little scrawny silhouette of a little ashamed boy, a little ashamed silhouette. And I made it about halfway from the kitchen to my bedroom, like tears in my eyes. And my mom flashed my dad a look that moms and dads know, which is, fix it, kind of thing. So my dad, like, now there's a little embarrassed dad silhouette, kind of thing, running after me. And he caught me because he's nimble and he's an adult. And he caught me and he literally dragged me back into the kitchen. And I remember like there were finger trails in the 1980s shag carpet, kind of thing, as he dragged me back into the kitchen. And we sat down, and for the rest of the night, no one said a word. right? And I remember being 10 years old, going up to my room afterwards and shaking my little 10-year-old fist at the sky. And I remember saying to God, I will never be vulnerable with anyone ever again. And as silly as that seems, I always feel a little stupid telling that story, it was real for me. You know what I'm talking about? It was a real thing. And for that next season of my life, I kept that promise. And it's almost like I just started closing myself off to people. And I followed all the way into college. So I remember I was in college, and I met this guy named Chris, and we were getting to know each other a little bit, and he said, hey, Jason, I've heard a lot of great things about you. And I was like, I like this guy. I like this guy. He's funny. He's insightful. He's an excellent judge of character. You know? And he goes, but I gotta be honest, I've been watching you, and I'm not that impressed. And I said, I hate this guy. He's stupid. He's a horrible judge of character. You know, kind of thing. And it was in that conversation we actually became friends, because you want to be friends with people who are honest with you. And about a year later, he goes, Jason, I want to tell you something. I said, what's that? And he goes, you remind me of a house. And I said, is it a nice house? Is it a big house? Is it a fancy house? You know, kind of thing. Is it an expensive house? And he said, you're a horrible listener. And he goes, I was like, what kind of house? And he goes, well, Jason, it's like you're a house. And he goes, very few people get to come onto your street. And he said, and even fewer people get to come into your yard. And he says, and maybe like one person gets to actually like ring the doorbell. He said, but nobody gets to come inside your house. And I got to be honest with you, I had no idea what he was talking about. Like no clue. It was like, because I didn't know. Here's the thing, when you close off rooms to your house, over time you forget that they're there. And you think that the size of your house is actually the rooms that you live in, rather than all the rooms that you don't live in. And I remember years later, I was in Los Angeles, and one of my mentors asked me this question. He said, Jason, if someone died in your life, who would you miss? And I didn't know how to answer the question. It's as if those parts of me had been sealed off. So you fast forward, and my sister and Anthony had my nephews, Elijah and Xander, and they're getting a little bit older, because I don't really know what to do with babies. It's like, oh, cool, I don't know, that's great. I'll see you in 5 years when you get sarcasm, you know, kind of thing. So we're going to church, and for the first time in my life, we were in church, and you know how it goes, like the kids go off, and you get the little card thing that says you're an adult and responsible for them, and you go to church, and then afterwards you get them out, and I said, hey, can I go pick up the nephews? I think Mandy was like kind of surprised. She's like, okay, you know, here. So she gave me the little like I'm not a pedophile card, and I was like, it's very important. And so I go over and I give the people that card, and then my nephews, like their heads pop up like little meat rats, you know, kind of thing. And I'm like, those are them. And my nephews, I'll never forget it. They were like, Jason, and I was like, yeah. And they kind of ran through, and then because I've got long legs, so it's kind of like a jungle gym, and so they were like, shoom, shoom. Right, kind of thing, like little kids do. And I'm like walking to Mandy and Anthony with the boys on my legs kind of thing. And you know, I've never done anything like that with them before, right? Because I've been kind of distant from them in that season of our lives. And you know that scene from The Grinch Who Stole Christmas? You know, when he's lifting the sled and his little heart like breaks the heart thing, you know, kind of thing. Right? That's what it felt like for me. It was like, and then his heart became 10 times bigger or whatever, right? That kind of thing. Right? And it was amazing. And out of my mouth came words I'd never said before. And I was like, I just love you so much. And they're like drooling on me or whatever. And I'm like, and here's the thing, like, you don't even have to be nice to me. You know, I just love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. And it was a defining moment for me. And it's almost as if other doors that I had closed years ago came bursting open. And that's when I realized that your soul's a house, and there are some rooms in your house that can only be answered or opened by others. There are some rooms that can only be opened by other people. It's that when we take risks to generosity, we have to do it in the context of community. It's the only way you get to be fully alive. There's not a person who's fully alive who lives a life on their own. The process to becoming fully alive happens in community. So real quick, what was the first word? Risk. Second word? Generosity. Third word, community. Now, we'll get two more. I'm going to burn through them real quick. The last one is one of my favorites. It is, the second to last one is, right here you go. Failure. Everyone say it? Failure. That one always gets the loudest. It's great. In America, we're all embarrassed by it. You guys are like, yes, failure. What Americans do, loudly. All right, it's fantastic. Okay, great. Failure. Okay. So here's the thing. Because how many of you have taken risks of generosity in the context of community, and sometimes it doesn't work? You ever have that moment? How many of you have ever done something and it didn't go the way that you hoped that it would? Right? And here's what's interesting about this. So what tends to happen when we take risks and it doesn't work and we fail, we tend to avoid things. You know what I'm talking about? You take that risk with that girl, it doesn't work out. I'm gonna pull away. You take that risk with your spouse, you take that risk in that job, you take that risk in that company, you take that risk in the act of generosity, whatever. How many of you ever had that moment where you take it like, forget it, I'm out, I'm done, it doesn't work? And that's the temptation. So here's a challenge with that. So when I was working at Pepperdine, there was another student named Jordan. Jordan's awesome. So you know the first day of class in uni where you do like the icebreaker type stuff, where you get to know each other a little bit, and we pay professors for this, which is awesome, right? So, and the icebreaker that I did was, I want you to go around and share something foolish that you did when you were a kid. Right, now just quick show of hands, you're doing great, we're almost done. Quick show of hands, how many of you can think of something foolish you did when you were a kid? Yeah, exactly, right? All of us can, right? It's fantastic, right? So we're going around, people are telling great stories. And we get to Jordan, and Jordan can't think of anything. And I look at Jordan and think, you can't think of one foolish thing that you did as a kid? And he goes, well, Jason, if I did it, why would it be foolish? He's an American, all right? That's amazing. And so I like this kid immediately because that we're doing the risks, right? And that week he took a risk to compose a love song on the guitar, which he doesn't know how to play, to a girl that doesn't know he exists. So we were excited. We were excited. And so he came back the next week. He walked into class and he was so excited. He was so full of life. And we said, how did it go? Did she fall in love with you? And he said, no. She filed a restraining order. And we raised our glasses and we said, Mazel tov to you, right? Because here's the thing, there are some risks that aren't worth taking even if you're successful. Can we just be honest about that? Some risks aren't worth taking no matter what happens. Then there are other risks that are only worth taking if you're successful. But then there are some risks that are worth taking whether you are successful or not. And what God wants to invite you into is a series of risks that are worth taking whether they work or not. Some of you are in marriages, and there are risks of love that are worth taking with that person whether it works or not. Some of you have kids, and you love them, and you're having a hard time connecting with them, and there are risks in your heart that are worth taking whether it blows it up or not. And there are some of you who have dreams of careers and ambitions and nonprofits and doing something general, and they are worth taking whether it totally blows up in your face or not. Because the purpose of risk isn't to get what you want. The purpose of risk is to become a certain kind of person. He wants to form a certain kind of person in you so that you can begin to do things that only strong people can do. See, there are risks in your future that God has prepared for you that can only be done by people who are strong. And when we avoid the risks we can take now, we are not prepared for the risks that He's calling us to take later. So when we take risks of generosity in the context of community, we will experience failure. We will be tempted to not get up, but we get back up. And that creates our last word. This is our last time for today. Everyone say it. Progress. We say it, progress, right? Progress. When you take risks of generosity in the context of community, you will experience failure. Take it to the bank. You will experience failure sometimes, but when we get back up, we experience progress. I mentioned at the beginning that moment, that Bambi 2 moment, right? When I realized Disney wasn't the king of story anymore in the 90s. And in that season, there was a new dog in town. There was a new film company in town that told amazing stories. You know what their name is? Pixar. That's right, Pixar. Pixar is the most successful film company in the history of cinematography. Every time they tell a story, they make $500 million. It's not bad. And they have a mission. They're on a mission to tell stories that inspire the world. And they've done a pretty good job so far. So what are some good Pixar movies? Yeah, Toy Story. What else? Yeah, Monsters, Inc. What else? Cars. What else? I hate cars, but what else? Yeah, Wall-E, the Ratatouille, The Incredibles, Bug's Life. Everyone always forgets of Bug's Life. All right, Bug's Life, like these are amazing stories. These are fantastic stories. And a few years into their history, they made a few hits. So they decided to take a huge risk, and they were going to make their first sequel. Now, what's usually true about sequels? They suck. Usually sequels suck. What are some examples of sucky sequels? Cars 2. Cars 3. Bambi 2. Anybody ever seen the movie Speed 2 on a boat? Like, come on, that hurts. Weekend at Bernie's 2. Not that Weekend at Bernie's was any good, right? Weekend at Bernie's 2, right? Usually these movies are really, really bad. And they got 2 years into the development process, and they discovered that their first sequel was bad. It was bad. And in the words of Ed Catmull, who's the president of Pixar Animation, he said, every film has a sucky phase, but this was too sucky too late. And they didn't know what to do. And they thought about just like releasing it to the one-eyed babysitter, you know, like putting it out straight to video. That's what they're gonna do. Let's just put it out straight to video. We're not gonna wide release it. Mom and dads can use it for babysitting, kind of thing. We'll just move on. But then they had this meeting, and they were like, something doesn't feel right. We don't know what to do. We want to tell world-class stories. So the next day, they called a meeting with all the animators. I've been in the room. It's about this size. It's a little bigger than this. And they had a room of all the animators. And John and Ed and Pete and Andrew and all the brain trust at Pixar, they stood on stage and they said these words: "We do not tell bad stories. We're going to gut the storyboards. We're going to burn the candle at both ends." And 6 months later, which is nothing in animation world, 6 months is insane. 6 months later, they released to the world what we all saw as Toy Story 2, which is one of the greatest sequels of all time and generated over $120 million more than the original. And in that moment, I remember hearing that story and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, that is exactly the same way it is for all of us. See, every human being has the exact same choice in any given moment. Every human being can choose whether they want to make their choices that will take them feature film or straight to video. That we can make choices that are amazing and extraordinary and inspiring and difficult and risky and rewarding. Or we can make choices that are easy and comfortable and small and expedient, and they give us an instant satisfaction with long-term costs. And Jesus wants to invite us into a feature film life. Riverview is being invited into a feature film future so that we can invite Perth into a feature film future, so that the world can be enticed into a feature film future. Because the world needs a reminder that we were designed to be extraordinary. We were made and crafted and uniquely to do something extraordinary with our lives, and we can only do it together. And here's what happens. If this community were to begin upping its game and taking risks of generosity in the context of community, if we would fail and get some juicy failures, come on now, get some juicy failures together, we will experience progress. And the whole world, even though it has no business running, the whole world will begin looking around for the nearest pair of running shoes. Let's pray. God, thank you so much for your scriptures. Thank you so much that you came not to shut us down, but to lift us up. That you came not to tell us to stop, but to call us to go. God, you are worth following. You are worth risking for. You are worth suffering for. May we do it together. May we experience the thrill of living the extraordinary life. We love you. It's in the name of Jesus I pray. Amen. Thanks, everybody.